What's the secret to a long and prosperous life? The bestseller list overflows with self-help books that have tried to answer this question. But the ultimate answer is laid out simply in our Torah, the best-selling book of all time. The fifth of the 10 Commandments reads, "Honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure and fare well on the land that the eternal your God is giving you." Put simply, honor your mother and father, and you will live long and prosper. As you sit here with me over the next 10 days, examining our deeds of the past year and praying to be written in the book of life, our tradition presents a commandment that guarantees a long and successful life. Last Rosh HaShanah, I spoke to you about the fourth commandment on the benefits of making sacred time on Shabbat. But the fifth commandment is the only one that promises a reward. All we have to do is honor our parents. Easy, right? Then why did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a famous 2nd century sage, say that honoring your father and mother is the most difficult of all mitzvot? The most difficult. We all know, sometimes all too closely, painful stories of parents who neglected or abused their children, physically or emotionally. And you might think in these cases, it is understandable why this would be one of the hardest commandments. But in fact, our tradition exempts a child from the obligations of honoring an abusive parent. So the commandment doesn't even apply to children of those parents. But for most of us in this room, we have loving parents who are human, who've tried their very best. And even if you have the most perfect parents in the world, and let me state for the record that my parents and in-laws are sitting right here in the front row, and they are wonderful. Really. But even then, our relationships with our mothers and fathers are complicated, and honoring our parents can be very difficult. Perhaps this story may resonate with some of the challenges. A young Jewish man excitedly tells his mother that he's fallen in love and he wants to get married. He says, "Just for fun, Mom, I'm going to bring her over with 2 of her friends, and I want you to try and guess which one I'm going to marry." The mother agrees. The next day, this is, by the way, not something you should try at home. Okay, the next day, he brings 3 women home, and he sits them down on the couch, and they chat for a while. And then he says, "Okay, Mom, can you guess which one I'm going to marry?" She immediately replies, "The one on the right." "That's amazing, Ma. You're right. How did you know?" And the Jewish mother replies, "I don't like her." Now, that's not even fair. Now, there is a fundamental tension between parents and children. And the tension comes down to difference. Our children are not us. Our preferences won't necessarily be theirs, nor will our passions or our strengths or our flaws. We call having children reproduction, but we're not reproducing ourselves at all. We're producing an altogether different human being. In his acclaimed book, Far from the Tree, Andrew Solomon writes, "We long for what may be life's most profound compliment, our children's choosing to live by our own system of values." Though many of us take pride in how different we are from our parents, we are endlessly sad when our children are different from us. Our children won't mirror us, no matter how much we've privately hoped they would. We've all met baseball-obsessed parents who can't believe their child doesn't enjoy an inning, or musical parents who can't believe their children can't hum a tune, outgoing parents frustrated that their children are shy, or driven parents who can't bear to watch their children procrastinate. I could go on and on. I recently had a father say to me, with a certain helplessness in his voice, "I just don't know how to spend time with my 9th grader anymore. We just don't enjoy the same things." Children are hardwired to differentiate themselves from their parents, but parents are hardwired to try to make their kids as much like them as possible. When you think about it that way, it can seem a little deflating, right? Like a mismatched couple where someone's heart is destined to be broken. And yet, what if we instead flip this reality and consider that our children's differences are precisely their gifts to us? Their differences expand our perspectives, knock us out of our comfort zones, force us to examine our own expectations. And that honoring doesn't mean emulating us or becoming us. In fact, our individual departures, big or small, don't dishonor, but rather honors our parents in their iconoclasm and independence. And just as well, those grown-up children who perhaps never rebelled in their youth show honor in their constancy. But the true test of the commandment, whether or not our lives mirror that of our parents, is how the relationship is sustained over time. How connected do we stay to our parents after we've made different choices? How kind are we to our parents even if we vehemently disagree with them? How forgiving are we of what we regard as their missteps, their prejudices, their unhealthy habits, or their unsolicited advice? How do we make them feel crucial, even if we no longer depend on them? For those of you children listening to this who are under 18, and I see a lot of you out there, and you are beautifully, many of you, standing up here on the bema, I'd ask you to push yourself to think about this commandment more deeply than you may have before. If not every day, then at least during these next 10 days until Yom Kippur. These days when we're supposed to give serious attention to how we live our lives and who we want to be. Honor your mother and father doesn't just mean be polite to them. It doesn't just mean thanking the people who are raising you for the food and clothing they provide, the guitar lessons and tutors, or the roofs over your head. Honoring them means trying to understand why they're saying what they're saying, why they nudge when they nudge, or hug you in public. Sure, we all fly through our days, and it's unrealistic to think that you're going to stop and really look at your parents every time you're running out the door to an activity. But for a moment, just a moment, see the person who loves you more than they have words to describe, who worries about you too much, who wants you to enjoy every blessing, and who suffers when you suffer even the smallest disappointment. Beyond that, I don't think any rabbi can answer what it means to fulfill this fundamental commandment for you kids living at home. It's for you to define what it means to honor your parents. I'd only urge you not to wait too long to think about it. You shouldn't make the mistake that most of us did. We didn't think about this commandment until we'd already violated it time and time again. Because the truth is, this commandment is not really for the children in this room. It's for us adults. The 5th commandment is for those of us who no longer rely on our parents for day-to-day physical needs or for financial or emotional sustenance. We are now the grown-up children who are in a position to disregard our parents simply by not needing them the way we used to, by forgetting to check in, or by being dismissive of their opinions. Sometimes we're impatient when they don't hear as well as they used to, or we tune them out when we've heard the story once or twice or more before. Perhaps we've stopped touching them. We've stopped asking them what they did last weekend. We haven't suggested lunch in a while. It's precisely when parents are no longer critical in the primary sense, when we've done them out of a job, that Judaism says we need to remember to honor them most. And our tradition views the way we treat our parents as directly correlated to how we treat God. When a person honors his mother and father, the Holy One says, "I view them as though I had dwelt among them and they had honored me." It's easier to obey and honor when your parents are still paying your bills and fighting your battles. But this commandment is for when your parents no longer do that for us. And Judaism asks us to affirm human value beyond productivity, just to honor life. That is a true test of our humanity. The New Yorker cartoonist Roz Chast has a highly lauded new memoir of her aging parents. And I'm sorry I can't show you the cartoons with it because it's great. She writes, "It's really easy to be patient and sympathetic with someone when it's theoretical, or only for a little while. It's a lot harder to deal with someone's craziness when it's constant, and that person is your dad, the one who's supposed to be taking care of you. Whether you are the child or the parent, there's often some poignant sense of loss in the relationship along the way, because everyone changes. We who are parents can yearn for the bond we had with our children when they were small, when they would jump up at the door to greet us every time we came in, and we could heal every wound with a kiss. Or we, as adult children, yearn for the invincible, all-knowing parents we had in our youth. And some of us yearn for parents we never had, because our parents weren't loving the way we needed to be loved, or weren't interested in our careers the way we wished, or didn't approve of the people we chose to build our lives with. A congregant recently shared with me that she had a wonderful, close relationship with her mother all her life. But now that her mother is almost 100, things have changed. Her mother has become very judgmental and difficult and completely unfiltered. When this congregant shared her frustration with her mother's caregiver, the caregiver said, "Why aren't you more like your sister? She has no problem with your mom." "Really?" the congregant asked. "Yes. She comes over, your mother starts talking, she falls asleep on the couch, no problem." It's an approach. It's much easier to ignore the transformation that happens as our parents age. It's sometimes too disquieting to imagine that one day we too will be less agile, more forgetful, less occupied, more wistful. But the conversation that began when we said our first words to our parents needs to continue even now, and it needs a discipline of directness and dependability. How can we properly honor our parents without talking to them? How can we properly honor our parents without trying to imagine what they feel right now? An aging congregant shared with me, "Do you know what it's like to labor just across the street? To walk while always worrying I will trip? Do you know what it's like for my child to witness me being helped to the bathroom? I didn't mind the help as much as I minded him witnessing that I needed it. We cannot honor unless we can begin to empathize. They say the most important sermons that rabbis give are the ones that we ourselves need to hear. Last winter, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and my sister and I have tried to go out to Tacoma with some regularity. We want to be with our parents. We want to genuinely help out, to honor them. But what that means has not always been so clear. Well, over Passover break, we swooped in and we cleaned the refrigerator and we replaced the microwave and we set up Quicken books for bill paying. We were there to save the day. And then I suggested to my mom that maybe we could hire a housekeeper for her to come every week and just ease the burden and, truthfully, a little of my own guilt. The house had just gotten a little dusty, and I could tell that it had gotten harder for my mom to take care of my dad in the house. My mother never in her life had a housekeeper. That was just not the traditional Korean way. But we insisted, and I researched online and interviewed a service that seemed perfect. And after the first cleaning visit, I asked my mom how it went. Well, she did a pretty good job, she conceded. I was thrilled that she would accept the help. So you'll have her back, I asked. Sure, she said. She can come back next year. To honor is to make peace with who our parents really are today. Not who we remember them to be, not who we wish they could still be. We honor them not just because they gave us life and taught us everything from the start, but because they're ours. Ours to honor, ours to embrace. To honor our parents is to really see them. To honor is to ask yourself more than once a year what they gave you and what they continue to give you. And if you no longer rely on them for anything, our tradition would say that's exactly when you need to honor them the most. The Hebrew word for honor, kavod, comes from the root for heaviness. To honor is to give something its proper weight. If you sometimes wobble under the burden of honoring your parents, you're probably doing it right. I hear many inspiring stories from our members who quietly live out this commandment with its weight every day. Honoring is substantial and sometimes cumbersome. It is, as we heard, the most difficult of all mitzvot. But if you feel the heaviness of it, you will ultimately feel the lightness of it. For our tradition reminds us that this essential act of honoring our parents is the key to a good and long life. Will upholding this commandment literally add years to your life? Who can say? But how we choose to honor our mother and our father and fathers, mothers and fathers, during their lives, during infirmity, old age, and even after they're gone, will set the model for our children, our nieces and nephews and godchildren, to learn how to honor not just us, but the elderly they encounter every day. There's a story of Shmuel, whose aging father kept spilling soup on the tablecloth because of his trembling fingers. One evening, the old man dropped a fine teacup, and it fell on the floor and shattered into pieces. "From now on, you'll eat in your room, Father," declared Shmuel. "Here's a wooden bowl for you to use. You can't break this." The next day, Shmuel came home, and he saw his very young son sitting on the floor, carving a chunk of wood. "Dearest Yitzhak, what are you doing?" Shmuel asked the boy. "I'm making a bowl for you, Father, so you can use it to eat in your room when you're old and your hands shake. If you set the right example with your love and your own sacrifice, the next generation will learn what it means to honor. And you will reap the benefits down the road. You will literally long endure and fare well in their care, in their memories, and in the memories of their children. Honoring is passed down. We are sowing with our parents what we'll reap in future generations. I remember so clearly the early days of being a mother and holding tiny Gabriel in my arms with utter exhaustion and exquisite wonder. And for the first time in my life, I really understood how much my parents must have loved me. And this child was so helpless in my arms. I had to feed him and bathe him. He couldn't even hold his head up on his own. But caring for his every need did not distress me or make me feel resentful. He was my future. If we are fortunate enough to have our parents' age, there may be a time when we have to feed them, bathe them, care for them. We keep the fifth commandment when we hold up their heads, whatever that means in this moment. And what we don't always realize is that reversal of roles, it's not just a look backwards, it's also our future. On these high holy days, we call God Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And we see God as a parent figure who throughout our Machzor asks us to take responsibility for ourselves as the new year turns, to look hard at our errors and try to make them right while we have time left. We might decide to ignore God's message, to treat God like an aging parent who has outlived his usefulness. But it is precisely in these moments of our self-sufficiency and even arrogance that this commandment comes to remind us that we must honor the source of our life, that honoring our parents and God is not contingent on what they can do for you. It is a test of who we are and who we hope to be. Avinu Malkeinu, our merciful parent, help us to appreciate the differences between parents and children, to truly see each other with empathy and patience, to remember to value life at every stage. Avinu Malkeinu, our merciful parent, hear our prayers so that we may honor our parents, so that our children might honor us, so that we all will honor you and live long and well in this new year, 5775. Amen.